The engine of the black SUV cut out with a final metallic shudder, leaving Sarah in a silence so thick it felt like a physical weight pressing against her eardrums. Outside, the suburbs of Oak Ridge, Illinois, were draped in a heavy midnight fog that swallowed the glow of the street lamps. It was 3:14 a.m. Sarah sat in the driver's seat, her knuckles white against the leather steering wheel, her breath hitching as she looked at the darkened windows of the colonial-style home she shared with Mark. The guilt wasn't a sharp pain yet. It was a dull, throbbing ache, much like the hangover she knew was coming. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, the pale light of the street lamp highlighting the disheveled state of her cocktail dress. She smoothed her hair and wiped a smudge of mascara from under her eye with a trembling finger. And she looked like the same Sarah who had left for a girls' night 10 hours ago, but inside she felt like a fragmented version of herself. She remembered the feeling of Julian's hands, the way they had laughed about poor, boring Mark over expensive gin. She felt a flicker of triumph. She had the perfect life, the perfect husband to provide for her, and the perfect lover to thrill her. She stepped out of the car, the gravel of the driveway crunching beneath her designer heels like breaking glass. The front door unlocked with a soft, mechanical click, a sound that usually signaled the safety of sanctuary, but tonight it felt like an indictment. She stepped into the foyer, expecting the scent of home. Usually it smelled of lemon polish and the faint, lingering warmth of a life lived together. Tonight it smelled of nothing, just cold, a filtered air, and the scent of floor wax. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Here at Family Secrets and Revenge, we dive into the shadows of the heart and the consequences of the choices we make. Sarah reached for the light switch, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. When the chandelier flickered to life, the brilliance was blinding, refracting off the polished wood. But as her eyes adjusted, the breath left her lungs. The foyer was bare, not just empty of people, empty of existence. The Persian rug, a gift from their honeymoon in Istanbul, was gone. The antique side table where she always threw her keys was gone. And even the framed photos of their wedding in Napa Valley had been stripped from the walls, leaving only pale, haunting rectangles where the sun hadn't reached the paint. It was as if a surgical team had come in and removed every trace of their 8-year history. "Mark," she whispered. The word didn't drift. It bounced. It hit the bare walls and returned to her with a hollow, mocking ring. She walked toward the living room, her footsteps sounding like thunder in the vacuum. The 70-inch television, the custom-built bookshelves that Mark had spent months installing, the velvet sectional sofa, all vanished. It wasn't just that the furniture was gone. It was as if the room had been professionally sanitized. There wasn't a single stray hair, a forgotten coaster, or a grain of dust. She ran to the kitchen, her heels sliding on the hardwood. And the stainless steel appliances remained, glinting coldly under the fluorescent lights. But the counters were stripped bare. No toaster, no coffee maker, no fruit bowl. She opened the fridge, desperate for a sign of life, even a half-drunk carton of milk. It was humming, perfectly chilled, and completely, terrifyingly empty. The freezer was the same. No frozen peas, no hidden pint of chocolate ice cream. Just white plastic and cold air. With trembling legs and a rising sense of vertigo, Sarah sprinted up the stairs. She burst into the master bedroom, her lungs burning with a cold, sharp panic. The king-sized bed, the center of their private world, was gone. In its place was a vacuum patch of carpet, the indentations of the bedposts the only proof it had ever been there. She threw open the walk-in closet. Mark's side was a void. Every suit, every silk tie, every pair of hand-stitched leather Oxfords, gone. But it wasn't just his things. She turned to her side of the closet and let out a strangled gasp. Her designer dresses, her shoes, her jewelry box, everything was missing. Her life had been packed into boxes and moved by strangers while she was busy betraying the man who paid for it all. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced through the numbness of the alcohol. She reached into her clutch for her phone, her fingers fumbling so hard she almost dropped it on the bare floor. She dialed Mark, her thumb shaking over the screen. The number you have reached is no longer in service. She dialed her best friend Chloe, the woman who had supposedly been with her tonight, but who had actually dropped her off at a hotel bar to meet Julian. The number you have reached is no longer in service. Sarah sank to the floor, her back against the closet wall. The silence of the house was no longer peaceful. It was a predator, closing in on her. She was a ghost in her own home, stripped of her identity and her belongings in a single surgical strike. She thought of the safe in the basement where they kept their emergency cash and her grandmother's pearls. She scrambled to her feet and ran. The basement was as empty as the rest of the house. The safe was gone, literally ripped from its moorings in the wall. As Sarah sat on the floor, her eyes caught a glimmer of white in the center of the room. A single envelope lay perfectly centered on the concrete floor. It looked like a tombstone in a field of gray. She crawled toward it, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Her name was written on the front in Mark's precise architectural script. She tore it open, her nails catching on the paper. Inside was not a long-winded letter of heartbreak, but a silver flash drive and a single printed receipt. The receipt was from a high-end professional moving and cleaning service based in downtown Chicago. The date, yesterday. The time of completion, 11 p.m. Mark had moved an entire household of furniture in less than 6 hours. He had planned this with the cold precision of a structural engineer. He hadn't confronted her. He hadn't screamed. He had simply waited for her to leave for her night out and erase the world they had built. But how could he have known? She had been so careful. She had used a burner phone kept in her spare tire well. She had used encrypted apps. She had even created fake calendar invites for work seminars. She thought she was a master of the double life, but Mark was a master of foundations, and he knew hers was built on sand. Sarah remembered her old iPad, left in the center console of the SUV. She ran outside, the night air chilling the sweat on her neck. She grabbed the device and ran back inside, locking the door behind her, a futile, instinctive gesture. She sat on the cold kitchen floor, the only light coming from the iPad screen. She plugged the flash drive in. A single folder appeared. The anniversary gift. Her heart skipped a beat. Their anniversary wasn't for months. She clicked the folder. It was a digital archive of her betrayal. Hundreds of videos categorized by date and location. The first video was dated 6 months ago. It was a recording from a hidden camera disguised as a smoke detector in their bedroom. Sarah watched herself on screen, sitting on the edge of the bed, laughing into her phone. I miss you too, Julian. Mark is at the firm tonight. He's so buried in his blueprints he wouldn't notice if the house burned down around him. He's so predictable, so beige. The Sarah on the screen laughed, a sound that made the Sarah on the floor want to vomit. I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. Is it the silence of the house or the realization that she was being watched the whole time? Does Sarah deserve to lose everything for those words? As the videos played, Sarah realized the terrifying extent of Mark's surveillance. He hadn't just tapped the bedroom. He'd tapped her car, her office, and even Chloe's guest room. Mark was an architect. He spent his life studying the integrity of structures, looking for the stress points that could cause a collapse. He had realized the foundation of their marriage was rotten, and instead of trying to patch the cracks, he had decided on a controlled demolition. The videos weren't just of her phone calls. They were of her and Julian in hotel rooms she thought were anonymous. There were recordings of her complaining about Mark's lack of passion while she used his credit card to pay for the room. There were photos of them at dinner, Sarah looking more alive than she ever did at home. The final video in the folder was different. It wasn't a surveillance clip, it was Mark, sitting in his favorite leather chair, the one that was now gone, looking directly into the lens. He looked calm, his face a mask of professional detachment, but his eyes were like flint. He was wearing the suit she had bought him for his birthday, the one he said made him feel like $1 million. Now he just looked like a man who had already buried the past. Hello, Sarah, the Mark on the screen said. His voice was steady, devoid of the rage she expected. If you're watching this, you've just come home. I hope you had a pleasant evening with Julian. Or was it someone else tonight? It doesn't really matter anymore. The who is irrelevant. The what is all that remains. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his intertwined fingers. You always said I was boring because I focused too much on the details. Well, you were right. I focused on the detail of the $4,000 spa retreat that appeared on our statement. I focused on the detail of the scent of a cologne I don't wear lingering on our linens. I focused on the way you looked at your phone when you thought I was sleeping. I'm an architect, Sarah. I'm trained to notice when things don't align. He smiled, a thin ghost of a grin that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't want a divorce, Sarah. A divorce is a negotiation, a messy tug-of-war over who gets the blender and who gets the dog. And I don't negotiate with people who set fire to my life while I'm still inside it. I don't negotiate with structural failures. I remove them. So I decided to give you exactly what you've been acting like you wanted. A life without me. Mark continued, his voice dropping to a low, resonant tone that filled the empty kitchen. Oh, by the time you see this, the house is no longer ours. I sold it 3 weeks ago to an investment firm. The closing was today at 5 p.m. Technically, Sarah, you are trespassing. The new owners will be here at 8 a.m. to begin renovations. They're going to tear down the walls you picked the colors for. They're going to gut the kitchen where you lied to me every morning over coffee. Sarah's breath hitched. Sold? Without her signature? How was that possible in the state of Illinois? You're wondering about the paperwork, Mark said, as if reading her mind. You should really be more careful about what you sign when you're too tired from work and just want to sign the papers and go to sleep. That insurance update I gave you last month, the one you signed without looking because Julian was texting you, and that was a comprehensive power of attorney. You gave me the legal right to handle all our marital assets. I've used it to sell the house, empty the accounts, and dissolve our joint holdings. He held up a glass of scotch. The bank accounts are closed. The cars are being repossessed, except the one you're driving, which is a lease in my name that I've reported as stolen. The credit cards? Canceled. You have the cash in your purse, Sarah. I hope it's enough for a hotel. Sarah felt the walls closing in. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a total erasure of her existence. He hadn't just taken the money, he was taking her reputation. But I didn't want to leave you with nothing, Mark said. I wanted to leave you with your truth. I've sent a copy of this folder, all the videos, the texts, the recordings, to your parents and Julian's wife, Aura and your boss at the gallery. I thought they should know the woman they've been supporting and employing. I thought Julian's wife deserved to know why her husband was working so many late nights at the office. Sarah let out a strangled cry. Her boss, Mr. Henderson, was a man of extreme moral rigidity who had treated her like a daughter. Her parents, in their small Ohio town, viewed Mark as a saint. They had always told her how lucky she was to have found such a stable, providing man. You told Julian I was a cold fish who didn't know how to feel, Mark said, his voice finally trembling with a hint of raw, jagged emotion. I felt everything, Sarah. Every lie, every touch you gave him, every time you looked me in the eye and told me you loved me while smelling like him. I felt it all. And now, you get to feel what it's like to be truly, utterly alone. The screen went black, reflecting Sarah's horrified face in the dark glass. Sarah threw the iPad across the room. It skidded across the hardwood, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the empty house. She stood up and ran to the front door, desperate to leave, to find a hotel, to find Julian, to find anyone who would tell her this was a nightmare. She threw open the door and stopped dead. The fog had thickened, turning the street into a gray abyss. Parked at the curb, its lights off, was a police cruiser. 2 officers were stepping out, their heavy boots thudding on the pavement. Their flashlights cut through the mist, landing on her face and blinding her. Ma'am, one of the officers called out, we received a report of a stolen vehicle at this address. A black SUV? Tree plate number KRL429? Sarah looked at her car. The vehicle she had driven home in. The vehicle that represented her status, her comfort, her carefully curated life. It was no longer hers. Nothing was hers. Not the car, not the house, not even the memories she thought were private. If you were in Sarah's shoes, standing in an empty house with the police at the door and your entire life exposed to everyone you know. What would your next move be? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. The officers were polite but firm, their voices echoing the professional coldness Mark had displayed on the screen. They checked her ID and then checked their computers. Ma'am, this vehicle is reported stolen by a Mr. Mark Sterling. He states he is the sole leaseholder and the vehicle was taken without his permission. And we have a note here from a property management firm that this property was sold and the previous occupants were meant to have vacated by midnight. I live here, Sarah stammered, her voice sounding thin and pathetic, even to her own ears. This is my home. My husband he's playing a joke. It's a misunderstanding. Not according to the deed, ma'am, the officer said, looking past her into the empty foyer with a mixture of pity and suspicion. The new owners filed a no occupancy notice starting at 12:01 a.m. It's 3:45 a.m. You're going to have to come with us to the station to sort this out, and we're going to have to impound the vehicle. They didn't handcuff her, but they escorted her to the cruiser. As she sat in the back, the hard plastic seat a stark contrast to the leather of her SUV, as she watched her house, her beautiful empty house, recede into the distance. It was the last time she would ever step foot on the property. The police dropped her at a 24-hour diner in a less-than-ideal part of town after 3 hours of questioning at the station. Mark had provided the police with digital copies of the power of attorney and the sale documents. Everything was legal. Everything was ironclad. They couldn't arrest her for trespassing on her own, former home without the new owners present to press charges. But they took the keys to the SUV and told her not to go back. Sarah sat in a cracked vinyl booth, a cup of lukewarm coffee in front of her. She had $40 in her purse and a dead phone. That was it. No cards, no phone service, no home. She felt like an alien who had dropped onto a hostile planet. As she used the diner's payphone, a relic of a bygone era, to call Julian's private line, the one he said was only for her. The number you have reached has been disconnected or is no longer in service. She called his office. Julian is no longer with the firm, the receptionist said coldly. Mark had been thorough. He hadn't just destroyed her world, he had neutralized her escape routes. Julian wasn't a savior. He was a coward who had vanished the moment his own comfort was threatened. As the sun began to rise over the industrial outskirts of Oak Ridge, painting the sky in cruel shades of pink and gold, Sarah walked. Her feet burned in her high heels, but she couldn't stop. She walked back toward her neighborhood, driven by a desperate, delusional hope that Mark would be there, waiting with a gotcha smile. But when she arrived, a large white van was parked in the driveway. Men in coveralls were carrying rolls of carpet and cans of paint inside. They were loud, playing classic rock on a portable radio. The transformation had begun. They were stripping the wallpaper she had painstakingly picked out in Italy. They were tearing up the mahogany floors they had danced on during their first Christmas in the house. She stood on the sidewalk, a disheveled woman in a cocktail dress and ruined heels, watching her life being discarded into a massive dumpster on the lawn. She saw her favorite lamp, the one with the silk shade, tossed onto a pile of trash. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on Mark's method of revenge. Is it justified, or has he gone too far by leaving her literally on the street? I read every single one. A silver sedan pulled up across the street. Sarah's heart leaped. Chloe. Chloe would help. Chloe knew everything. Sarah ran to the car, tears blurring her vision. Chloe, oh thank God. My phone is off. Mark sold the house. Chloe didn't unlock the doors. She rolled down the window just an inch. Her eyes were red, and she looked at Sarah with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. I got the email, Sarah, Chloe said. Her voice was flat, dead. The one with the video of you and Julian in my guest room while I was at my mother's funeral. The room I let you stay in because you said you needed a safe space to get away from the stress of your marriage. Sarah froze. The air felt thin. Chloe, I can explain. I was lost. Don't, Chloe said. Mark called me. He told me everything. Well, he even told me how you used my name as an alibi for every single hookup for the last year. My husband wants to sue you for defamation because of the lies you told about us to cover your tracks. Never call me again. And if you show up at my door, I'm calling the cops. You're a predator, Sarah. Chloe threw a small plastic bag out of the window. It landed in the gutter at Sarah's feet. Those are the things you left at my place, Chloe said. The stuff you thought I was keeping safe for you. Consider it your inheritance. The car sped off, leaving Sarah in a cloud of exhaust. She knelt in the gutter and opened the bag. Inside was a pair of silk pajamas, a toothbrush, and a photo of her and Chloe at brunch, laughing over mimosas. Sarah looked back at her house. A worker came out carrying the large, framed wedding photo she thought had been packed. He didn't see her. He tossed it into the dumpster. The glass shattered with a sound that felt like it was happening inside her own chest. She realized then that Mark hadn't just taken the furniture. He had taken her narrative. He had taken the good Sarah and replaced her with a monster in the eyes of everyone she loved. She had no home, no friends, and no history that wasn't tainted by the videos on that flash drive. Days turned into a blur of gray light and cold nights. Sarah found herself in a women's shelter 2 towns over, in a city where nobody knew her name or her crimes. The transition from a 4,000 square foot home with heated floors to a cot in a room with 12 strangers was a physical, agonizing pain. She spent her days at the public library, using the free computers to search for Mark. She was obsessed. She needed to find him, to beg for forgiveness, or at least to see him suffer. But she found nothing. No social media, no current address, no professional listings. He had resigned from his firm and vanished into the digital ether. Then she found a news clipping from a small paper in Vermont. Renowned architect Mark Sterling donates $2 million to rural housing project for domestic abuse survivors. The date of the donation, the day after she came home to the empty house. He hadn't just taken the money to be spiteful. He had given it away to the very people she had pretended to be. He had liquidated their entire life and turned it into a legacy that specifically highlighted her betrayal. He had used her exit to build homes for others. 3 months later, where Sarah sat on a park bench in a town she couldn't name. She was wearing clothes from a donation bin, a faded sweatshirt and jeans that were too big. She looked at the ring finger on her left hand. The tan line where her 5-carat diamond once sat was finally fading, the skin evening out. She had a job now, waitressing at a local diner. It paid the rent on a studio apartment that smelled of cigarettes and old wood. It was a life, but it wasn't her life. Every time she saw a black SUV or a man in a well-tailored suit, her heart would stop for a beat. She often thought about that night, the moment she flipped the switch and saw the void. She realized that the house hadn't become empty when Mark moved the furniture. It had been emptying for years, one lie at a time, one secret text at a time. She had been living in a hollow shell, and Mark had simply been the one to finally turn on the lights and show her the truth. She was the one who had moved out long before the movers arrived. One afternoon, a package arrived at the diner for her. No return address. Just her name, Sarah, written in that unmistakable architectural script. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of a beautiful, modern house built into the side of a mountain, overlooking a lake she didn't recognize. It was a masterpiece of glass and steel, glowing in the twilight. On the back were 4 words, "I built this alone." No threats, no insults, no updates on his life. Just the ultimate proof that he had moved on, that he was still capable of creating beauty, while she was still haunted by the echoes of the empty house he had left her. He had found his peace in the structures he built, and she was left wandering through the ruins of the ones she had destroyed. Sarah tucked the photo into her apron. She had a shift to finish. She had a life to rebuild, though she knew the foundation was gone forever. She walked back into the diner, the bell on the door ringing with a lonely, hollow sound that followed her into the kitchen. Thank you so much for watching this journey into the darkest corners of a broken home. This story reminds us that sometimes the most silent rooms hold the loudest truths. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Family Secrets and Revenge for more cinematic tales of betrayal and justice. What did you think of Mark's final message? Was he right to leave her with nothing, or did the punishment exceed the crime? Share your overall thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time, keep your secrets close and your eyes open.